it's never going to be just uphill. It's going to be up and downhill. You have to deal with challenges, and challenges are what grow you as a person.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Homework Help Show Student Influencers Podcast. Today, I am joined by Mehar, and it is lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you for having me, and it's such an honor to be here as a part of your podcast and your video series. I think what you're doing for young students is so amazing.
Thank you so much. So first, when we get started, we usually like to ask a few kind of get to know you questions, just to kind of introduce who you are to our audience. So I know you already told me this, but where are you right now? Where are you currently located?
So I'm from New Delhi, India, but I currently live in London, United Kingdom.
Perfect. And where were you? You said you were born in India?
Yes. So I was born and brought up in the capital of India, New Delhi, and I moved to London in 2016.
Perfect. What school did you go to, or what university, college?
I studied in New Delhi. There was this, it's a really big school called Delhi Public School. And then I did my undergraduation from Delhi University itself before I decided to do the Chartered Accountancy course and then moved to London for my MBA.
So is that what you majored in when you were in school before you took accounting?
Yes. So in our high school, we have to choose either science-focused subjects or business and commerce-focused subjects. So at a very young age of 15, 16, you have to decide sort of your major for the rest of your life. So yes, I was only 16 when I decided to get into the whole business and commerce fields. And then I did my graduation also in business and commerce majors. And then I decided to sit for the accountancy course, which is the Chartered Accountancy. It's equivalent to the CPA in the United States and ACCA in Canada.
That's a pretty big decision that you have to make at 15, 16 years old.
Oh yeah, yes, it really is. And it's so, the competition is so intense in India. Because it's so many students and less opportunities, so you're always putting so much pressure on yourselves at a very young age to just overperform and do your best. And then it's sort of, once you've chosen your stream, you can't really go back. Like I can't be a business student at the age of, and then at the age of 18 decide to do an engineering degree. It's not possible.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of pressure.
It definitely is.
It's like, here's what you're doing. You're stuck with this now.
Yeah, forever. Definitely. Yeah.
What are you doing? So right now you're working as an accountant?
No. So now I'm a strategy consultant in London. I work for a boutique strategy consulting firm, focusing on helping businesses and clients formulate and implement their business strategies. So I don't really use a lot of accounting or finance in my day-to-day role, but of course that whole education is a solid base for whatever I help the clients with. It's always a good foundation. And of course what I did in the MBA, which was more strategy focused, studying, that comes into play almost on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'm sure that's also just a good thing to kind of have in your back pocket, that knowing how to kind of work with finances and navigate all of that stuff. Because I know that's something that a lot of people, if you don't have that training, it's really hard to kind of develop those skills, and they're very practical skills. So
definitely, yes, you're right. I think that kind of knowledge never goes to waste, because you'd know how businesses prepare their financial statements, what affects each decision they make affects their financial statements and their tax position. And even on a day-to-day personal level, you are more, I think, able to save more, budget better, make day-to-day decisions a little bit better. But it comes handy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So now that you are kind of in your career position, what would some of your goals right now be, like short-term or long-term goals?
So I think I'm a very goal-oriented person. I think goals really motivate me to keep going throughout the year. So I set new goals every year. But I would say, I think short-term goals would be, since I am working in London, and I haven't done consulting in London before this, like I have been working in my job for 1.5 years, but it's also getting to know how businesses work here, building stronger relationships with clients and big stakeholders, and moving up the ladder and making the most of the opportunity. And the thing that I'm doing on the side is creating content for students. And my biggest goal for that is to reach as many people and help more students, as many people as I can. So that's a long-term goal. But yeah, I set short-term goals to reach that that big goal very
That's
regularly.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that sometimes, I think the thing is that some people kind of get in that, once they've graduated school and they kind of get into that, kind of like their career position, and they start working and stuff, some people I think tend to forget to keep setting themselves goals, and they kind of lose track of like, okay, well, there's still more to go from here, but I'm comfortable now, so I'm just going to do this for a while. And they kind of lose that motivation, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you make it sort of a game for yourself, that you want to get to this position at the end of 6 months or 1 year or 1.5 years, if it's a promotion, if it's a pay rise, if it's building stronger relationships, or maybe moving to another position within the same organization, or starting something of your own, or moving to another organization, it should always be leading towards something. Otherwise it just falls flat, and then you don't have that motivation to get out of bed every morning.
Yeah, and you kind of lose that purpose of like, why am I waking up every morning and doing this? Like, what am I doing all of this for?
Yeah, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah. I'm sure everybody questions that at some point, but
Definitely.
at least the goals help you remember why. They give you the answer.
Definitely. And I think everybody has bad days. Everybody has those days when they don't know what they're doing or where they're heading. But then when you look at your goals, you open your notebook or you open your journal, and then you remember, okay, this is what I had in my mind, and this is what I'm working towards. And then it just sort of helps you come back to the right path.
Yeah, kind of remember where you are.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask, what made you want to get into this field and to study accounting? But I guess it was kind of like a decision you kind of had to make when you were 15, 16.
No. So actually, once you do take business related subjects, there are still so many things you can do. I decided to take up the chartered accountancy course at the age of 19. There were so many other things I could do. I could have done economics. I could have done, just business analytics, things like that. But I chose to do accounting was because I enjoyed the subject, and it is one of the toughest set of exams in India. And I just, it was sort of my dad who was like, why don't you give a shot at this, when I decided to do it, I didn't think that it's going to take me so many hours of studying, but it was just, one of those things you do to prove yourself, or you're just like, okay, I can do it. I don't regret it. It was difficult. It was 16 papers and it was 5 years of studying, but wow. I think it was well worth it.
Yeah. Do you have any anything you learned along the way with this specific field that you could give as advice to other students who are maybe wanting to lean this way?
I think anybody who's trying to get into the field of accounting should just remember that just get your basics strong, your basic concepts strong. And it's also, I think, as an accountant or anyone working with numbers, they really have to understand how businesses operate, because like I said, all business decisions affect the financial course of the organization. So try and understand how whatever you're doing or whatever you're learning is affecting that, and communicate. I think it's also a very communication heavy field of work. It's going to be a lot of relationship building, if it's with the client, if it's with anyone in the same organization. So I think those skills you will need to develop fairly quickly.
I think that I think that's important, because the communication aspect and the relationship building is something that I think people might not associate like traditionally with accounting and with like financial fields like that, because you know that you have the stereotype of like an accountant just like sitting in an office crunching numbers all day. And I feel like there is that big communication aspect, but I feel like maybe you don't really think about that when you think of accounting or even any financial field or economics, really. So I think that's important to know.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about the relationships. It's also the environment that the organization is working in. If it's studying, the trends in the industry or the markets, the way the economy is moving. There's so many factors that affect the decisions of an organization. So I think learning all that is very interesting, and also keeping up to date with the changes that are coming in laws and regulations. You have to keep yourself up to speed and read all these newsletters and notifications and on a regular basis. So just keep your information, just like a doctor. A doctor has to keep learning what's happening in their fields. And similarly, an accountant or any tax consultant or anybody working in a very niche expertise field has to stay aware of the market trends.
Yeah, staying on top of all the news and updates that come out all
Definitely.
the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does seem to be something that's always changing. Like I'm not in any financial field, but I see like all the time there's like new update from, in Canada it's the CRA or
Yeah.
those agencies. It's like new update. It's like, okay, what do I have to remember just to do my taxes?
Yeah, definitely. You have to keep up to speed, and if you're not good at it, hire help, or ask other people. Like, don't be shy of asking questions or just Googling something you don't understand. There's a YouTube video on everything now.
Yeah. There's a lot of info out there online too, I guess. But
Yeah.
if you don't understand numbers, it's hard to,
Yeah,
even when you
definitely.
Google. Like, I'm not a numbers person, so sometimes I'll try to Google something and I'm like, what is this? I can't. So then I need help.
Yeah. And one shouldn't be shy of taking help, right? Like,
Exactly. I'm fortunate because my mom is a bookkeeper
oh,
and
wonderful.
accountant, so I just text her if I have questions. But
Great.
that's lucky.
Yeah, it is.
Another thing, I know we kind of met you on originally on Instagram, and on your social media, you have all of these really, really nice travel photos too. Is that a big passion in your life as well?
Yes, it is a big passion in my life. So I have traveled to about 28 countries, and I think
Oh,
that's something that my parents always did. Like, they always took us on these nice holidays. And then when I moved to London, I made the most of being in Europe, and I made sure I traveled around, visited the cities and countries I always wanted to. Um, I think it's the best way to use your money, is to get new experiences and learn about a new place.
yeah, that's amazing. Were you able to do that a lot when you were in school, or did you have to kind of buckle down on your studies and hold off?
So I rewarded myself with holidays.
Oh,
So
perfect.
I would study really hard before the exams, and then once the exams were over, I would make sure to go on a trip with my friends, even if it was within India or like to other Asian countries like Thailand or Sri Lanka, I know, Malaysia, Singapore, all of that. But when I was in Europe, yes, again, the same. It's so easy and not very expensive to travel from London to all these European places. So yes, I would make sure that I had all my coursework on track. And then on the weekend, if we had no classes on a Monday or Tuesday, then I would take a long break, a long weekend off with my friends.
I think that is the best kind of reward that you could give yourself. I mean, like some students, it's like, okay, I'm going to reward myself with like a night out or something, but I think that's way more fulfilling.
Yeah, definitely. It's also exciting. You get to pack and decide your outfits and go out with your friends. So yeah,
Yeah, and you get to just have all these new experiences and stuff
definitely.
that traveling can give you a lot of those experiences that you would never uh, have the opportunity
Of
to
course.
have otherwise. So I
Yeah.
definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, like the culture, the food, the
Hmm.
music, all of that.
Yeah, even just like the exploring and going to just like seeing how what life is like in a completely different country from your own is
Yeah.
really incredible too.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so you said that earlier, that the exams were some of the toughest exams.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of balance your workload when you were in school overall? Like, did you work part-time as well, or
Uh,
any like extracurriculars or anything like that?
yes, I've always been into extracurriculars as a student. It was also about, of course, about schoolwork and all of that, but I went for dance classes, I went for singing classes, I used to go for tennis classes at one point. So yeah, I was used to always juggling multiple things. And I think because I did that since I was a young student, I was used to it. So yes, I always try to do more than just classwork. I really liked to dance, and going for dance classes really gave me that whole energy, and to go back and study again for the evening. But yeah, I think that break of doing other activities and incorporating those other activities in your daily timetable, or maybe even just on the weekends, is important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a nice place to meet other people, who are not from your background and who are not doing what you're doing, because you have a similar interest, and then you meet people who have the same interest, and that's always nice.
Yeah, and it's probably good, like doing an activity like dancing, or even like a sport or anything like that is probably a really good way to kind of de-stress too in the middle of
Yeah.
all of, if you're in like mid-exam season, or if you're just under a lot of work or a lot of pressure from assignments and things like that. I'm sure that's seems to be a pretty go-to way to kind of just center
Recoup.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. It's a big stress buster.
Yeah, for sure. Did you kind of have any like a did you I'm trying to think of how I wanted to word it. Did you develop any kind of like system on how to keep track of everything you were doing? Like, did you have a time management routine or anything like that you did, or something that helped you?
Yeah, definitely. I was always a very organized student, so I would wake up in the morning, make a list of things that I wanted to do during the day, even if it was like a class or an extra class with a professor, or an assignment that I had to work on. I would always make a list. And when I was just studying from home and didn't have any classes, I would always make like a very specific timetable. Where I knew that I'm going to study for, let's say, 4 or 5 hours, and I'm going to take a break for 1 or 2 hours for lunch, and then again sit back. So I think it's very important to keep a track of your time, because sometimes when you're just studying on your desk, time just flies, and there's no point just sitting and not being productive. It's very important to have a list of things that you want to do and get done through the day. um, and I think that brain dump in the morning, when you just have all these thoughts in your head, you just like write it down and then review it at night before going to bed, to make a list for the next day. It used to motivate me a lot, when I have clarity of what I have to get done. So yes, I did. I was pretty structured in my studying and managing my coursework.
Yeah, I think that's an important skill that not everyone ends up learning properly when they're in school, but I think also it's really important to have that structure, because like you said,
Yeah.
if you're just sitting there, even if you decide you're going to have this long study session and you're just sitting there, but you're not really doing that much, it's
Yeah.
really a big waste of time.
Definitely. I think if you can't study, if you're feeling distracted, if you're feeling unproductive, just get up from your desk, take a break, go for a walk, listen to music, watch Netflix, and then I think everybody has those peak hours of performance during the day. So
Hmm.
make the most out of that time when you're feeling the most productive. For me, it was 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. So I used to get the most done at that time, and then I would sleep late, but then I would study till late. So I think it's very important for each student to figure out when they work best, and then plan their day according to that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because not some students, like, they're the most productive when they wake up in the morning. Some students need a little time to get going. Some students are just not morning people.
Yeah,
And so it's hard to just say one specific thing, because everyone is just so
of
different.
course. Yeah, definitely. I think that's what you have to build your system around what works best for you. If you like to be working in a silent environment, then you have to make sure people, if you're living with people and there are no people in your house at that time, or they're asleep. But if you like noise, like a little bit of noise, and you can go study in a cafe or in a coffee shop, it's different for everybody. But just try and figure out what works best for you and when are you the most productive, and then replicate it and do it again and again, and then
Right.
make a
Yeah.
system for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. That's the best system for sure. And same with like there are people, everyone has different kind of learning techniques. So some people do better when they read things, and some people do better when they listen to things. And understanding your own your own habits and
Yeah.
learning methods is also, I think, a really important part of all of that.
Yeah.
Just so you know, like when you're studying, okay, I'm going to read this, but I'm not going to remember any of it. So you may as well, find a different tool to use for that instead to maximize your time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I agree with that 100%. It takes time to figure out what works best for you. Like for me, maybe it could be note taking for some subjects, but the other subjects it could be watching a video and then quizzing myself afterwards. It's very important to keep testing yourself and try and remember what you learned a week ago or 2 weeks ago and keep revising it again and again.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah.
What kind of life skills would you say that you learned when you were in when you were in school?
So are we talking about MBA school or my undergraduation?
Whichever you feel is more
Okay,
relevant.
I think I learned the most during my MBA is because I was in a new environment. I was an immigrant in a new place, and at that time it was learning about working with other people from other fields, people from other countries, and learning from their experience. So I think being comfortable in who I am, and being vocal about my experience is something that I learned during university. We shouldn't feel shy of our experiences and not constantly compare ourselves with other people. I really suffered from imposter syndrome, and I thought everybody in class was better than me. Whereas I think there are so many things that I have done which other people hadn't done. So it's all
Right.
about reminding yourself that you have been on a path and on your own journey, and speak up about your experience more often. And other than that, I think I really learned how to network, and I think it's so important to keep like to go on events either after school or just add people on LinkedIn and have a conversation with them. I think that's something that my career counselor at my MBA school in London, she taught me. She said, reach out to people. People want to help other people. So just network, go for events, figure out what you want to do, figure out what you don't want to do after university, and then make a plan to apply for jobs and all of that after that.
Did you have kind of like a did you have to kind of do a transition period with going to a new country for school? Like, was that a little bit, how did you find adjusting to that?
Yeah, sorry, your voice was breaking a little bit,
I'm
but
sorry.
yeah, I think for me moving, so when I was applying for my MBA schools, I applied to 6, 7 countries around the world, but I always had this soft corner for London, and I always wanted, when I was growing up, I always wanted to live in London and work in London. So when I got through my MBA school, Imperial College, there was no second thoughts. I had to come and study in London. So because I came here and it was my dream, I really made the most of this opportunity. And it's not a very inexpensive course, so I wanted to make the most of the money that had gone into the program, going above and beyond. So I think adjusting was just in because luckily in India all our education is in English, so
Okay.
I didn't have any communication problems as such. And the people here in England are very polite and very welcoming. I haven't had any adjustment problems from people, but yeah, it's of course getting used to their ways of working, the way they speak. Every country has its own culture, so just adjusting to those little bits and bobs was that took time, and I'm still learning. I still try and absorb what people around me, how they speak, how they conduct themselves, how they present at meetings, how they deal with clients. So yeah, it's an ongoing learning curve, and I think you shouldn't stop learning as you move along your career.
Right, exactly. That's fortunate that you didn't have any of those language barriers when you got there, because I know obviously a language barrier can be a really big hurdle for a lot of international students.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I understood English. That was good. I could speak in English, but of course, there are some phrases that it takes time to getting used to. And I would still Google a few things. What do they mean when they when they say this? But yeah, it wasn't as hard as it would be that if I had moved to France to do an MBA, for example, then it would have
Right.
taken more time getting used to like speaking in French. And I know that all businesses in France communicate in French. That's their first language. So yes, hats off to those who move to countries where there's a different language altogether.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough situation too. Like, I have all respect for people who are able to do that, because it's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, definitely.
So kind of circling back before, when you mentioned your social media where you help students, and can you kind of tell me a little bit about what you do there?
Yes. So last year I had a little bit of free time. I was on a project and I would come home relatively early, which was like 5 o'clock. And I would think, I had all these messages coming in on my LinkedIn account from young students who wanted to know about my career path and how I moved to another country, how I used my chartered accountancy degree to do an MBA, and then what I was doing now. And these were like a lot of kids, and I was like, okay, these people need help. And that was the kind of mentorship that I really really needed when I was young. And of course, your parents, your family friends, they guide you a little bit, but people who are not, I mean, they may not know what's exactly going on in the industry you're trying to get in, or in the course or field of study you're trying to get in. So that's something I really craved when I was growing up, in my early 20s. And I thought that why not create a platform to help other students, and everybody can come together, share their talk about their failures, talk about their doubts, and everybody can support each other. And how I decided to do that was through a YouTube channel. And it was very scary at first. I just made a video and I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't tell any of my friends. I didn't tell any of my family. I was shy to talk about it. But when I saw the response and how many people benefited from those videos, I'd get these long messages and emails and comments that how my short videos were helping them. That's what kept me going. And I wanted to talk about my failure. I wanted to talk about the moments that I had self-doubt and I had low confidence. And I just wanted to tell people that if I can do it, if other people around me have done it, you can do it too. And I think at that, when you're like 17, 18, 19, 20, you don't know where your life is heading, and you're just putting so much pressure on yourself. There's so much competition. And you just want to be the best. And if you look at someone who's done it for 5 to 10 years, you can maybe learn a little bit from them.
Yeah, and it's a pretty scary thing to put yourself out there on the internet, and especially with YouTube, or even I guess any social media in general, because there's always like that you're worried about, like, oh, what are people in the comments going to say, or like or there's always so much negativity, so it can be really scary to do that. So I mean, not a lot of people can work up that inner courage to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think I didn't luckily get too many negative comments.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but sometimes I do, and it really gets to me. And I think you have to build a wall around you. You have to stop caring about what people say. So what I've done is I don't take too much of the praises very seriously, but I don't take any of the negative comments very seriously either. So if I start just thinking about the positive comments, and I sit on a bubble or sit on a cloud and, oh my god, I'm the best, that's not how it should work, because then a negative comment can come and act as a prick on that bubble or that cloud. So I don't let any of the negative or positive comments affect me. They just help me. I mean, I just keep going, and that's what it helps me. It gives me a push, but but that's it. Then I think you have to just stop caring what people say and do what you're supposed to do. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to stop caring what people say and what
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a big problem with the internet. But I think that's a good point of how um, just not listening to anything people are saying too, because that is a really good point about how sometimes if you let all of those positive comments and all of that really good like all of the really
Feedback.
strong feedback, yeah,
Yeah.
if you let all of that get to your head, then you can just end up in this really inflated um, sense of self that's really, really easy to damage, and it's really easy to like one negative comment can really break that down, and it's just that fall from that is really impactful or really damaging too.
Yeah, definitely. And I've actually watched a lot of videos from other very, influential people or people who are putting their whole life on social media, and they just say they don't engage with any of the negative comments. Some people actually go on and delete each comment, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, it's fine. It has to, whoever's one doesn't like your work, they'll always be there, right? You can't,
Mm-hmm.
everybody can't love you. That's how the world, we don't love
Right.
so many people ourselves. Like, we are so opinionated about other people. So
Mm-hmm.
that's going to come back, and you just have to keep going, do what matters to you, and you just keep going.
Right, exactly. I think that's definitely something everyone, even if you're not putting yourself out there on social media, I think that's still something that everyone should probably keep in mind just in your regular life, and
Yeah.
kind of thinking about that in that perspective of um, just not letting other people's opinions get to you and just kind of doing yourself, but also at the same time not being too negative to other people,
Yeah,
not trying
definitely.
to get to them.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my favorite quotes has always been, "Be kind. Someone you meet is fighting a harder battle. You don't know what other people are going through." And I've actually seen that. The strongest people could be going through hell at home, or hell in their relationships, or in their career, or health. So it's just, we don't know. We don't know what other people are struggling with. The least we can do is just be neutral, or if you don't
Hmm.
want to be over friendly or over polite, just don't be negative. That's the least we can do.
Yeah, like don't contribute to a battle someone else is fighting because you don't need to. It's
Exactly.
unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. A lot of our listeners are students who are, they're getting to that point where they're graduating soon, um, and a lot of them, when you're in university, there's not a lot of um, classes that really teach you like here's what to do in a job interview, and like here's what to do to look for jobs and stuff like that. So a lot of our listeners are kind of in that place where they're about to start putting themselves out there in the job market. So do you have any kind of advice off the top of your head that you could share for those students listening?
Yeah, definitely. I think so many things. I would just say, reach out to people. Like I've said before, I was actually researching on one of my videos for one of my videos, and there's a very interesting statistic that is 85% of jobs are found through networking, and I think that's so that's so. I mean, the value of networking is very much understated, and I think it's all about building strong relationships. So go out there, meet your friends of friends, talk to your professors, get recommendations from your professors, and just hustle. I think the first job is just about hustling and talking about your experiences. Don't feel shy to talk about your story, and highlight what you've done in a stronger way. I think sometimes we undervalue what we've done. So it's all about talking about your experience, either getting help from a career counselor, or talking to other students, or really identify the kind of roles you want to do, and then reach out to those people on LinkedIn, or see what they've done in their life, and see how they're talking about their experience, and see how you can highlight those key phrases on your CV or on your resume. um, so yeah, I think and I think the first job is always going to be either a hit or a miss, and in most cases it's going to be a miss,
Mm-hmm.
because first of all, you don't know what you really want to do. And I truly feel the early 20s are to figure out what you don't want to do versus what you want to do. Not everybody is, not everybody decides that they want to be a doctor or an engineer at the age of 15, 16. Some people decide that later in life. And if you're one of those who hasn't decided yet, who's still figuring out what they want to do, I think just absorb as much as you can in your first few jobs. You will have to start at the lowest level possible, but learn as much as you can. Listen to how your seniors are talking, how the people who are more experienced in the organization or more experienced than you are dealing with with the situations. And really, I think it's all about on-the-job training. And now the world is sort of moving towards giving more importance to work experience than the degrees we have. And I've actually seen that play out in the organization that I work for. So, and really build your soft skills. In the beginning, it's all about learning how to, draft good emails, presenting yourself properly, just putting yourself out there and making the most of the situation. And also don't be afraid to ask questions. I think I didn't do that. In my first few jobs, I was just like, okay, if they're giving me a thing to do, I should just be perfect at it. I didn't ask questions, and I wish I did. So don't be afraid. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Just ask as much as you can, learn as much as you can when you're starting out your career.
Yeah, I think that's all really good information. But I think going to those, speaking about the soft skills that you have to learn, I think that's another thing too, is because when you're graduating from school and you have to immediately transition from that student life into like a working professional life, I feel like a lot of people kind of get lost in that transition because it is a pretty big transition. Like all of a sudden you have to start sending these professional emails and you have to start presenting yourself in a professional way. And I feel like it's kind of just this immediate jump. So do you have any specific tips about making that kind of jump towards the like working professional life?
I think once you're done studying, firstly, enjoy that you're not studying anymore. Like you're done with studying. Yeah. So celebrate. Other than that, I think, like I said, it's very important to observe what other people are doing, especially who are seniors. Who have more experience than you. So really observe, see what they're doing well, what you like about them. Also, I think in the first few years, it's very important to seek mentorship. So maybe find someone in the organization who you really connect with and just request them to talk about their journey and ask them how you can build your skills or what more you could be doing to add value in the organization. So just, I think, go above and beyond. And do more than what's asked for, because those years will sort of build a foundation for the rest of your career. Even if you decide to go on a whole other path later, that experience will always be invaluable. So enjoy the experience of not being a student anymore. Save as much as you can is what I would say. Have some sort of saving plan, even if you're not making too much money, but try and save 20-30% of your salary, and learn and seek mentorship as much as you can.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, because I feel like too, one of the biggest differences that I noticed anyway is when you're in school, a lot of people, you get those people who are they go above and beyond in school, and like they're the one in the class that causes the class to stay another 5 minutes because they asked like 4 more questions, and everyone's like, oh my god, like, so this person. But so that person kind of gets that stigma of being like brown noser or whatever. Yeah. But when you go to that working life and when you all of a sudden you're in a job, it completely flip-flops, and like there's no longer, instead of being like, oh, like you're the suck up like nerdy kid in the class, all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually that I should be doing that. Maybe I should have been doing that this whole time, because it's just like flip-flops. So all of a sudden that's like what you're supposed to be doing, and that's you need to start kind of becoming that person that you were just making fun of.
Yeah, definitely. But Leslie, I would definitely say that there are going to be those kind of people in whatever job you do. So there will always be people who are outperformers and who are just doing better than everybody else, and you'll always wonder, how do they do it? Like, how are they so good at what they do?
Mm-hmm.
But I would just say, like, make a space of your own in wherever you work, and be known for one or two things, and really highlight those skills, and just work on those one or two skills that you enjoy, and become the go-to person for those one or two things. It doesn't have to be, you can't be a jack of all spades. You don't have to be brilliant at everything. But if you really focus on one or two things, and build and speak about your experience, and build a niche, I think that's more fruitful than comparing yourself to the best employee, person who's getting the best employee award every year.
Yeah, definitely. And it also goes back to the whole not knowing what's happening behind the scenes in everyone's life too. Like, you don't know what kind of things, like, if you're comparing yourself to somebody else, like, you don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
To get, like, you don't know how much extra they're doing to kind of get where they are, and you can't really just compare yourself like that, because they're in a completely different, even if it's the same type of job, everyone is in a different position.
Yeah, definitely. And there are some things that we are good at that we could be helping the organization or our bosses with. So
Mm-hmm.
let's work on those skills. Like, if like, it's important to recognize what we're good at, and keep doing. For example, in my current job, everybody says that I'm really known for having a positive attitude. So I try and highlight that. Like, if there's a deadline, I always say, okay, no, we can do it. Let's work on it. So I may not be the most intelligent person, but I know that I will be the person who has the can-do attitude, or who will build the team to work together, um, and all those things. So I think just recognize what you're good at, and really highlight that.
Yeah, definitely. And instead of saying, how can I be more like this person, think of it more like, what can I offer that I'm good at, or from my skill set instead.
Yeah, definitely. Or just if there's somebody you look up to, like, there's this really great manager in my organization who presents really well. So reached out to him and said, how do you do it? Like, how do you present so well? Give me some tips. I'm actually going to be catching up with him shortly, and he's going to, just run me through the things he does before presenting, at work. So I think it's just about, like, learning and reaching out. People mostly want to help you.
Yeah, and not being afraid to ask for that help, or to reach
Yeah.
out to someone and say, hey, can you, share your insight with me?
Yeah. That's something I really struggle with. Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
finally comfortable with, just reaching out and asking for help.
Definitely. One of the other things too I noticed, from looking at your some of your YouTube videos, was that you talk a lot about communication skills and like presenting type of skills. And we get a lot of people who ask us regularly about how they can improve their communication. Um, sometimes it's for they're learning how to communicate. They're learning to speak English and communicating, or they're learning how to communicate professionally in a job. Do you have any kind of like quick tidbits that you could share for improving your communication skills?
Yeah, I think, uh, like, communication has a few aspects to it, right? So one of them is, of course, written and verbal communication, and then there is how we represent ourselves, how we're standing, and how our body language. So I think it's very important to take a note of both of them. Um, just, small things, like, we don't even notice these things on a daily basis, but standing straight, making soft eye contact, not very harsh eye contact, but also having a smile on your face, like, a smile can go a long way. And I think communication is so important, when you're talking to somebody. It's about connecting with them on a personal level also, because if you develop that relationship with the person, it'll be easier to communicate on a professional level. So ask them, like, how are they doing, how's their day going, how's their project going, things like that, and then get to what you want to say. And for written and for the way of speaking or developing stronger English speaking skills, I would just say observe, like make notes of how people present themselves, or how people are, what are the phrases they're using. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, so watch a lot of English shows, listen to a lot of podcasts. If you're going to work, if you're traveling, just put on, there's so many podcasts on work tips, on CV tips. Listen, podcasts like this one, it's great. Like listen to what other people in the industry are doing, and learn and make notes. I think the best way to teach yourself is from the environment. So just pick up on those skills, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect 10 on 10 from day one, but you pick those skills up. And another thing I would say, if you're writing emails, I would say write once, but read thrice. So make sure you're, proofreading what you're sending. It's a small punctuation mistake can change the whole meaning of an email. So just make sure what you're reading. Maybe if you're not sure, reach out to another colleague who can read through it for you, or help you sort of draft what you're trying to say. So again, like, it's observing others, it's continuously practicing to improve yourself.
Definitely practice is key. I think for any skill you're trying to learn, practice is, if you don't practice something, it's never going to go anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it's like, if you're trying to improve your vocabulary, just learn one new word a day and use that. Like, don't just learn it and forget about it. Like, use it. So you have to keep doing it again and again. It's all about repetition.
Yeah, especially when you're learning a new language. If you stop practicing it, doesn't matter how fluent you are, you're gonna forget it.
Yeah. You have to keep practicing.
I know that's what I tell a lot of the people. Like, we have a lot of followers in other countries, and they're always asking about learning English, and that's what I always say every time is, don't stop practicing. Just practice.
Yeah, of course. Like, and sometimes, if you're from another country where English is not your first language, when you're thinking of a sentence, you're always going to think about it in your mother tongue, so in your own language.
Mm-hmm.
But try and phrase that sentence in English and say it out loud. Even if it's not to anyone else, just say it out loud to yourself, just so your brain gets tuned to thinking in English, and then that swap is easier.
Thinking in English is actually something that someone asked me about that, like, recently, within the last month or so, and I just kind of stopped, and I was like, I've never thought about that before, about the fact of that you have to actually, it's one thing to be able to speak in English, but to actually train your brain to think in English. Like, I was like, I didn't even think about that. And then I just kind of started doing all this research, because it was just something that had never, like, as a native English speaker, it had never crossed my mind. But I was like, yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, it really does. So I actually speak 3 languages, and
Wow.
Punjabi is the 3rd language. It's from where my family is. I know how to speak and listen in Punjabi, but my brain would not go and think in Punjabi. It's always going to be either Hindi or English.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's about remembering so that's what I'm comfortable in English and Hindi, but I'm not that comfortable in Punjabi. So your brain goes back to thinking in the languages you're comfortable in. So challenge your brain to think in English is what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a big thing for sure. So I think that's super helpful.
Thank you.
So kind of moving in a more on a lighter note, what is one of your favorite memories from when you were in school, either undergrad or business school, whatever you want to choose?
I think I have so many memories, and when you say memories, I just think of my friends.
Yeah.
But I think those are the best years of your life, because you're going to meet some amazing people, and those people are going to be in your life, hopefully, for a long time. I would just say, I think my favorite, like, there was a very big hustle culture in my home, because my parents were always like, okay, you shouldn't be sitting idle, like, do something, either study or practice an activity, or, so I was always I was always very busy. So I think my favorite memories were, of course, learning so many great things in school and picking up these great skills from my professors and these case studies or practical examples. But I think it was the part that came after school, which was, working in groups, working on projects, working with teams, learning about other people's experiences. There's just not one memory. There's just so many evenings spent studying with others, learning about them, going for events together, and just growing up together. So I think make the most of your university college experience, because it only comes once, and you will always think back to them being the best days or the craziest years of your life, because you're doing so many things, but you're loving each moment.
And it will go by way faster than you ever expected, and then one day you're gonna wake up and say, what? Like, where did all my time go? Because that's what happened to me.
Really?
I was like, it just went by way too fast, and now I have to, become an adult, and it just like, but yeah. And another thing I think too, even to build on that, is those friendships are so important, and they do always end up lasting a really long time, because I think one of the biggest things about going away to college, university, wherever you end up going, that's the time that everyone's kind of finding themselves at the same time. So the people that you kind of become in university, that's when you've really hit that mark. So then when you make those friendships in that stage of your life, it's a lot more like longer lasting, because everyone's just kind of coming into their own, and they're kind of settling on who they want to be.
Yeah.
And so I think that has a really good foundation for a lot of those lasting friendships a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have you've been through the worst with those people when you're struggling with classes and you're figuring out what you want to do, you're applying for jobs. And then when those friendships last, you don't have to talk to those people every day of your life after university, but whenever you meet them, it's going to be like, nothing's changed. It's the same. It's as evergreen and everlasting friendships. So just keep in touch with them after university is what I would say.
And it's easier than ever now with the internet to keep in touch with people. So there's not really an excuse.
Yeah, really isn't. Unless you're like on a social media detox or something.
or if you're just like one of the 1% of people in the world who don't have social media.
Yeah.
I know you kind of already mentioned this too before, but one of the questions that one of our kind of go-to questions on our podcast is, we always ask, if you could go back and talk to your 15-year-old self, what would you tell yourself? And I know you kind of did already mention this, that you would tell yourself to stop listening to whatever, stop worrying about what everyone thinks. But what else, is there anything else you would say?
Yeah, so I think as a 15-year-old in a country like India is not easy, because there's so much competition. We have one of the toughest set of exams at the age of after 10th grade and 12th grade. So there's a lot of pressure to perform really well, and a lot of kids, they really go through a journey of failure and self-doubt, and they put a lot of unnecessary pressure on themselves. And I think I was one of those. I was just like, okay, this is going to make or break my life. And I just want to say it's 10, 12 years later, and nobody asks about how much I scored in my 10th or 12th grade. So if I could go back in time and talk to my 15-year-old self, and I would just tell her that, do your best and learn as much as you can, but don't think that your life is dependent on what you're going to do for the next 2 years. Just enjoy the journey, enjoy the last 2 years of high school, and just learn as much as you can, and then just life is going to figure its own path, and it's never going to be just uphill. It's going to be up and downhill. You have to deal with challenges, and challenges are what grow you as a person. So I would just say, relax, take it easy, do your best, and leave the rest up to destiny, or your hard work will pay off.
I think that's really great. That's really, a lot of the times, this kind of thing is helpful, not even just for students to know, but for kind of everyone to think about. Just kind of sit back and do your best and stop putting all that pressure on yourself, because that's when everyone gets into those like spiraling out of control, or they run into like a burnout or overstress themselves or overwork themselves, and it's most of the time it's really not necessary.
Yeah, definitely. Because when you're that young, you're like, okay, no, I have to get into a good college, I have to get into a good university, and then that's gonna make my life. And you don't even know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, just take it easy and enjoy the process, enjoy the hurdles. And I mean, it's difficult, but you'll get through them, is what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I know you kind of already did this as well, but we usually also get our guests to kind of share one of their favorite motivational quotes. And I know you already kind of did, but do you have any other kind of quotes you would like to share?
I have so many. I have like a list of quotes I love, but I'm going to just pick one or two. I think these are two quotes that were said to be me by my parents, especially when I was, giving the chartered accountancy exams. And they're not very easy to clear. And it sometimes takes multiple attempts. And in those days, my parents just said two things to me. My mom said, try until you succeed. So keep going, even when you don't want to. And my dad said, setbacks are temporary. So things that are a setback for you right now, it's not gonna be raining all the time. The sunshine will come, and the hurricane will pass. So just keep going, and don't lose faith. Trust your vision, trust you're meant to do great things, and you will.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And super inspiring. I think, I think that's a really good kind of final note. A lot of what you have shared today has been really, really helpful. And I think especially because, like I said, we have a lot of students who are listening, who are about to graduate, or they're in maybe their final 2 years and they're kind of getting a little nervous and not really sure. So I think a lot of that's really important, because they don't just there's no job interview class that you take in your final year, and you kind of just are thrown out into this world of this working world, and it can be really scary. So I think that everything you've shared has been really helpful. Do you want to drop the name of your YouTube channel right now so we can put it so people can follow you and check out your videos?
Yes, thank you, Leslie. My YouTube channel's name is Mehar Sindhu Batra. And like I said, I'm just trying to help as many students as I can. I just want to say one final thing to your students is, I know it's tough, but it gets better. Just look out for resources that would help you. The internet is full of great things now. So if you're struggling with anything, just Google it, and there's probably somebody who's done it already. So they'll be happy to talk about their experience with you. Just reach out to people and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Amazing, definitely. And we'll put a link to your channel as well in the description so that everyone can head over there. But yeah, so any final insights that you want to share before we kind of say goodbye?
I would just say that just keep going, and remember that your challenges and your tragedies build you as you go on your way. So don't be don't be afraid to talk about it. If there's anything that you're struggling with, it's okay. Everybody's going through something, and if you do become successful, and if you achieve all the milestones that you wanted to achieve for yourself, never forget where you come from. And it's very important that we sometimes forget that when we're doing great things, we're on a cloud nine. So yeah, just remember your roots is what I think really keeps me grounded. And be grateful for your experience in everyday life.
That's important too.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate you joining us on our podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Leslie.
And we really appreciate all the insights you've shared. It's going to be super helpful. So we're really looking forward to that. And we will definitely keep up with you in the future and keep checking out your YouTube videos.
Definitely, Leslie. If you ever need me to help your students with anything, please do reach out.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.
You too. Bye.
Bye.